Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 662 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. And so our ninth book, Here's to Leaders, The Legacy of Service. So go and pick up that book on Amazon today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring fraternity and sorority leaders together. Fun fact, today's college students are way too stressed out. There is tremendous pressure on today's students to achieve high scores in college in order to get their first job. Now that job market is the grimmest job market in years, according to the New York Times this morning. There are global wars happening at the moment. The cost of gas is up, the cost of groceries is up, and the housing market seems completely unattainable for Generation Z. So, given all of this, I found a stress management specialist that is going to help our college student listeners manage their stress. Ron Dushkin, MD, is a holistic physician, stress management specialist, a former consultant to Westinghouse and Johnson & Johnson in setting up their stress management employee wellness program. He is a charter member of the American Holistic Medical Associate and a former president of the American Institute of Homeopathy. Welcome to the show, Dr. Ron.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hey, it is fantastic to have you on and your expertise. It's very generous of you to give your time to our college students today because you've spent more than 30 years helping people to manage stress. And we're wondering what first inspired you to focus on stress management as a physician.
Well, it was before I was a physician. I was in medical school, and I was really stressed out without knowing it. Spending all of my waking hours in the hospital, library, lecture halls, not realizing how stressed I was. And a friend of mine had become a yoga teacher, and Carolyn invited me to attend one of her yoga classes. And I thought, this is totally absurd. In the midst of my busy life, I don't have time for yoga. But somehow fate intervened, and I went to the class. And in the course of the class, I began to notice all the stress I was carrying in my body and in my mind. And it began to change my life as I began to look into, what does it really mean to practice yoga? What does it mean to learn to meditate? What does it learn to learn relaxation? And this is before there was the internet. So I spent free time in the library, finding research on the benefits of relaxation. There's a famous Harvard researcher named Herbert Benson who wrote the book called The Relaxation Response, which began to document the actual medical benefits of learning to relax. So it became part of a journey for me to not only notice my own level of stress, but to notice the stress of the people around me who are there to serve people, but were really stressed out themselves. And then as I began to practice medicine, I noticed that most of my patients were suffering from stress as well. Excuse me. And the first thing that I noticed is we have to learn to acknowledge that we're feeling stressed without feeling shame or embarrassment. There's no escape from stress. What I've said to many people over the years is that if you want to live in a world where there's no stress and it's totally relaxed, you're on the wrong planet. It doesn't happen here. Stress happens. So it's not a question of having no stress. It's really, what can we do to manage it when we experience it?
Yeah, I love that. And you and I both discovered yoga in college. I also took a course in college and started doing yoga there. And I was completely blown away at how the instructor was able to train me to essentially shut down every single part of my body to the point where I can now go to sleep on command. And people laugh about it all the time. And they're like, there's no way you're going to fall asleep in 30 seconds. And I'm telling you, I'm like, I've been instructed exactly how to do that. And it
Yeah.
is completely possible. So I'm happy you and I both discovered the benefits of doing yoga. Now, what's
Did
interesting
you ever
is
did you ever become a yoga teacher yourself?
I never thought about it,
I
but who
actually did become
knows?
one in medical school.
Who knows? Maybe. Who knows? But it
Yeah.
goes beyond just yoga because in medical school, you started studying the relationship between diet and stress and disease. So, what did you discover early on that changed the way that you thought about health?
Well, I didn't learn it because of my medical studies. I learned it while I was in medical school, in spite of my medical studies. And I don't like the word diet because it's like die it. I prefer the word live it. It's got a different meaning to it. So, in the book, I talk about how it's not just what we put into our body, but it's also how we put it in. The teeth that we have are not just there for pretty smiles. The teeth we have actually begin the digestive process. So it's chewing that makes it's where the digestion starts. And you make the food particles more available for your body to absorb. One of the biggest things I hear over the years from patients, well, I don't have enough time to eat. I always say, well, really? Well, maybe you can eat less during that time. Oh, what a novel idea.
Hmm.
Yeah, so and also what we put into our bodies, it's impossible, almost impossible to avoid sugar. I myself happen to really like chocolate chip cookies, so I'm not sugar free. However, also have to recognize that sugar is not only has no nutritional value, it has a negative nutritional value. Because in order for the body to process the sugar, it requires using nutrients. Now, I'm not a big believer in lots of supplements, but I am a big believer in a multivitamin. I don't know anybody whose diet is totally balanced. I don't know anybody. So a multiple vitamin to me is like cheap insurance to make sure you get certain basic nutrition into your diet, which doesn't include pizza or cheesesteaks or things like that a lot of college students eat.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, that's very helpful. The other thing that's interesting about you is you became involved in alternative and holistic medicine long before it became kind of mainstream and the cool thing. What resistance did you face early on in terms of alternative and holistic medicine?
Well, it's a communications thing, really. You have to be careful about how you present things to people. If you kind of say your system sucks, mine is better, there's no dialogue that goes on. So I'm about building bridges, like offering things like talking about sugar, like talking about chewing, like talking about relaxation response. Herbert Benson, this Harvard um, researcher, did a tremendous thing, and he'll be able to build a bridge between conventional medicine and alternative or holistic medicine by documenting the physiologic effects. Doctors can talk in terms of science. And when you see science and data, it makes it a little more acceptable. That became a stepping stone. Now, one of the things you and I probably grew up with was hearing the old phrase, oh, you're making yourself sick. Who didn't grow up here, right?
Mhm.
But when was the last time you heard the phrase, oh, you're making yourself well? We never
Never,
hear it. We
never.
never hear it. But this body and mind are so beautifully balanced that if we have the power to throw them out of balance, we also have the power to bring them back into balance. And we're not taught about that. So using the body, mind phenomena becomes a very important method, not only for health, but also for managing stress.
Very helpful. And your book is called Manage Your Stress, Manage Your Life. And it talks about something called first reactions as an early warning system for stress. So, can
Yeah,
you explain how students can use this idea of first reactions in their daily
sure.
life?
Sure. I wish I had known about this when I was a college student so many years ago,
Yeah,
because it's such a difficult time. It's stressful in a lot of different ways. We're no longer in the house. We have more freedom, which is potentially valuable and also potentially dangerous. So it's human beings have a reactive nervous system in mind. There's no escape from that. And that's part of the beauty of being human, as opposed to this AI stuff where it's just information. So first reactions to stress come in what I call four flavors. And I use the word flavors because I like to eat, and so flavor is important. They come in the psychological one. The first one is it starts our negative thinking. Oh, there I go again. I'm not okay. Blah, 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 blah. The second one is the emotional level. We become impatient, irritable. This is where I show up. And I have friends and close people around me who I trust who are willing to point that out to me when I'm going into my first reaction. And because I've learned to notice it, I'm able to catch it quicker and interrupt the spiral. The third category for some people is the physical. They start to have digestive problems, tummy problems, neck and shoulder issues. And the fourth category is the behavioral one. For some people, I start talking really quickly, and they go on and on, like, what are you talking about? Or they withdraw, or they begin to get into some bad behaviors, food being the first one, and there's lots of other behaviors. The key here is to learn and identify what our first reactions are and minimize the judgment we have about them. Because we're geared up to judge ourselves, to criticize ourselves, to get into this I'm not okay process. And if we can learn to simply notice our first reactions, it helps to decrease the spiral of getting worse and worse and worse. And the other thing, which it took me a while to realize, is that when I began to notice my first reactions, I began to notice other people's first reactions. And I then didn't need to respond in kind to their reactions. I can just mentally say, oh, they're having a first reaction and not fuel it. And it will begin to burn itself out if it's not fed feedback.
Very helpful. Awesome. The other thing your book talks about is something called the stress management breath, or SMB. Can you walk us through how this stress management breath works and when should somebody be using it?
Right. And I've since given it a subtitle called the Goldilocks breath, where it's not too deep, it's not too shallow, it's just the right amount. Now, often we're told take a deep breath. Now, unless you've been trained in some yoga breathing, you're probably going to stress yourself out by taking a deep breath, like I just did to myself. Also, if you take a deep breath, you're going to bring notice to yourself. You're going to bring attention to yourself. People are going to notice what's going on. So what I've discovered is that this Goldilocks breath, this stress management, just a little bit deeper than normal, will give you the same physiologic effect of noticing your body relax, noticing your mind slow down without bringing attention to yourself. I was recently in a situation where with some friends, and someone was describing a really bad life situation in their family. And we all felt stressed from it. And I thought, I can't take a deep breath and draw attention away from what he's talking about. So I used some of the stress management breath. And I noticed that I was able to slow down enough to be present for my friend rather than focusing on me. And that's a really compassionate thing to do when you take the focus off yourself and offer that compassion to someone else. So the stress management breath can be used anywhere. No one will notice it. No one's going to tell you to stop breathing. I tell all my patients to keep breathing. It's really important. And so as you begin to incorporate it and practice it, you'll notice the benefits will come even quicker and quicker. And it become part of what I call beginning to develop stress management habits.
Very nice. Excellent points. I really like this a lot. Now, when we talk about reducing stress, so people always talk about two things: diet, or in your words, live it, and also exercise. You hear this all the time, but how much does that really influence your stress level?
Well, the live it part actually prevents stress because if you overeat or eat the wrong things, you're going to feel physically bad.
Mhm.
When you feel physically bad, you feel mentally stressed. So that's more of a prevention aspect. The exercise is really valuable unless you're trying to become an Olympic athlete and you're really not qualified to be one. If you're pushing yourself too far, you can end up with injuries and excess stress on your body. But the physiologic aspects, our bodies are geared towards the fight or flight response. It's survival mechanism. We've all heard about this. You're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger and your body gears up to fight or flee.
Mhm.
But we have the same response now without any inherent survival danger. So those hormones that are built up in the bloodstream, exercise helps to work them out. So it's a therapeutic approach if you do it correctly. Yoga is one aspect to it, aerobics is another aspect to it. Using resistance bands, which I like, is another aspect to it. So it not only gets rid of the stress in your body, but also creates greater health in your body. And the better health you have, the more, I love the word homeostasis. Homeostasis means balance. Now, it's not a tightrope where, oh my God, I can't. It's a path. And as long as we can come back to that path of balance, stress dissipates.
Hmm. All right, very good. Now, I want to make sure we didn't miss anything. We have diet or live it. That's kind of the prevention mode. And then we have exercise. We have things like yoga. Are there any other daily stress management habits that students should be developing early on in life?
Absolutely. And the point you make is that a lot of the things that we learn during college time are creating habits that take us into the rest of our life.
Right.
So if we develop bad habits, those tend to come with us. If we develop good habits, they tend to come with us also. There's something that I look at stress management, I call it HIPCO. It helps with health and wellness. It helps with productivity. It helps with creativity and vision, and it helps with outcomes. We're so often taught work harder, push yourself. Do more. You can do more. Oh, you're not doing well enough. One of the things that happens at some point is the law of diminishing returns. When you push yourself past that point of productivity where it's comfortable and you stretch a little bit, but if you stretch too far, the time you're putting in doesn't justify this few rewards you get back. So how to find that balance is really a key thing. We talked about the breath.
Hmm.
One of the things that I've noticed is that the feeling of gratitude is probably the greatest stress reducing event in the moment. And all of us have things that we in our life we can feel grateful for. For some people, it's the people in our lives, family, friends. It could be pets. It could be our body. It doesn't matter what you're feeling grateful for. The goal is to induce the feeling of gratitude, not just a thought. Thoughts are valuable, but feelings are even more powerful. It's like saying, "Oh, I think I love you." Well, that's nice. Versus, "I love you." There's a big difference, same words, but the energy of thought versus feeling is really significantly different. Now, in the feeling of when you're truly feeling grateful, stress does not exist. It can exist before, it can exist afterwards. But in the moment of feeling grateful, all is well. It's like taking a mini vacation in the middle of your day. And the content doesn't matter. I have patients who say they swear by this now. They learn this and they stop during the day and take a mini break. Go, I feel grateful for my daughter.
Mm.
Ah, what's better than feeling grateful? I mean, that's the best, right?
Yeah, that's a great exercise. I hope that every college student listening does that, and maybe in the morning to start their day, maybe in the middle of the day. It's really is a great mini vacation as you kind of labeled it. It's a great exercise, and I hope they do that every single day because we do have so much to be grateful for. Outside of all the problems that are going on in the world, there are some really great things that are happening.
Now,
The other
you
thing,
mentioned, I want to interrupt for a second. You
yeah,
talked about the beginning of the day and the end of the day.
yeah.
And I have a chapter in the book about how to start and end your day. I used to, many years ago, I used to wake up with, oh crap, I have blah, blah, blah to do. And I thought that just set up for feeling stressed before it even happens. So I've trained myself, and it's very cool. I wake up, the first thought that I have when I wake up is, I wonder what cool and satisfying things are going to happen to me today. And it's like an invitation to life to bring them to me. Now, will there be some uncomfortable things that happen? Of course they will. That's called life. But at least I'm setting my day off. And then going to sleep, it used to be, oh no, I'm thinking about what didn't go right today, what I have to do tomorrow. And I've trained myself to feel at least three things I'm grateful for from the day before I go to sleep. And it like washes some of that stress away and prepares me for a better night's sleep.
Mm. Very, very nice. I really like that a lot. I hope that everyone's going to be doing that today and tomorrow and really testing it. And the other thing is too, I'm sure you have a lot of patients who are young professionals, people who are either ready to graduate from college or maybe they're new and entering the workforce. What stress mistakes do you see these patients making?
That's a great question. I'm going to use an example of this 64-year-old guy I saw who was a successful lawyer.
Hmm.
And he was very successful, but he's still worried every time he had to deal with a new case. And I said to him, Robert, you have a pretty good track record, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Things usually work out well for you, right? Right? Yeah, yeah. Well, why don't we assume that things are going to work out well and then figure out how you're going to get there rather than assuming they're not going to well and then struggle to make it happen. So the attitude that we have is really important in our expectations. If someone is doing reasonably well, why don't you assume based on your track record, you will continue to do well rather than being afraid that you won't?
Hmm.
I've certainly discovered that being afraid that I won't doesn't produce a better outcome. It just makes me feel more stressed.
Yeah. You obviously have patients that are both old and young over your career. You've been mentoring students at institutions like Harvard, Cornell, Columbia. And of course, you have some of the elderly patients that you're working with. What differences do you see in terms of younger generations handling stress and then the older generations?
Younger generations are just creating their habits. They're a little more fluid in being able to change. Older people are more often stuck in their habits, and it's a harder thing to change. Not impossible. They just have to really be committed to want to make change. Now, I heard someone say many years ago, the only person who doesn't resist change is a baby with a wet diaper. We change is not something we always look forward to unless we really get bottom and we're really suffering. But change is happening as you and I sit here and talk. Our bodies are constantly undergoing change. The cells are constantly going to change. Metabolism is happening. So change happens whether you like it or not. But a younger person is more fluid. They're more likely to incorporate new habits that set the stage for further improvement. Older people, it's a little more difficult.
Yeah. Well, it's good you're talking to college students today. They're a little bit easier to make those changes. And then hopefully later on in life, they'll be much healthier when they come to see you. That would
And
be great.
happier,
And
not just
happier.
healthier, and happier.
Yeah, 100%. Is there
Yeah.
anything really surprising that you've learned about stress after decades of working with patients in this area?
Stress happens. There is no escape from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the way the planet is set up. So some stress we can really enjoy. Like if you get a great surprise from someone about something that's physiologically stressful, but it feels so good. And if we get really disappointed by someone, stress happens and we feel badly. But we're fluid. We're not stuck. We have the ability to change. And that is like, it's very reinforcing for me. It's like what I call resilience. I have a very close friend who will go into bad moods and get really upset about something. And I stopped trying to change her. I've more learned to accept her and trust her resiliency because she always comes out of it. And when someone trusts my resiliency, it's very helpful for me to not stay stuck rather than someone trying to talk me out of something.
Mm.
Talk doesn't always work. If it did, psychiatrists would be much more successful than they are.
Well, listen, it is empowering to know that we have all of these tools, all of these resources to deal with stress. When stress happens, there are real tools that can help. I think many of them you cover in your book. The book is called Manage Your Stress, Manage Your Life. So if our listeners, if they want to pick up your book or they want to connect with you for some stress management, where should they go?
I do personal stress management one-on-one consultations via Zoom, and they can call the office at 212-582-1313, and we can schedule something and make it a very personalized lifestyle evaluation to both prevent stress and manage stress at the same time.
That is fantastic. All right, so call Dr. Ron's office. He will schedule a Zoom session with you no matter where you are in the country, and he will make sure to get you those stress management tools. And the book is incredible. Go and pick up the book. It's called Manage Your Stress, Manage Your Life. Dr. Ron, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Michael. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. And to our listening audience, I know that you learned something today. So I want you to share this episode with your entire fraternity and sorority chapter. Drop a link in a group chat, share it on social media. You never know who is stressed out and needs to hear Dr. Ron's message today. Thanks so much for joining us.
One last suggestion.
Yeah.
Find a gratitude buddy and get into asking that person, what do you feel grateful for from today? And let them ask you. And then you begin to create a dynamic of feeling grateful with someone else.
There you go. I think that's a perfect exercise for our fraternity and sorority leaders who are listening. Find that grateful buddy today and tell each other what you're grateful for today. Start there. Thanks so much for joining us.
Better than finding a drinking buddy.
There you go. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Bye for now.
Care.